Hey there, this is Alex with Gray Area. Welcome to our series Spotlight, where our mission is to build a bigger and more united house music community by sharing new and exciting artists, festivals, and event brands with you. In this interview, you hear from Yousef, producer, DJ, and owner of Circus Recordings and the Liverpool, UK club of the same name. We'll talk about his decades of experience in the industry and his litany of roles from event producer to musician to dance music activist. Be sure to like this video and subscribe for more interviews just like this. So I always like to start interviews off with asking someone to describe their sound to me like I've never heard dance music before.
Okay, I think my sound is, I like to play, everything I play comes with a degree of honesty. It must be music that I love and I'm connected to. I like to put it into an order where people feel like they're having a good time. I'm there to entertain, but also to enlighten. And what I mean by that is I like to play new music, but I want to watch the crowd go nuts. I seldom, if ever, play the hits, so to speak. I like to move forward, but it's always the heartbeat of house music. But it could be weird electronica, but it could be blistering techno as well. But for me, it all comes from the same source.
I like that. Well said. Well said. Can you talk a little bit about your musical upbringing? What kind of music were your parents listening to at home, and how'd that impact you?
Yeah, well, it's funny. There wasn't that much of a musical upbringing, really. I think my first earliest musical memory was my mum was into somebody called Dr. Hook, who was kind of, I think he was like was he English or American folky star, but the first music I got into was kind of early hip hop. Yeah. And specifically these albums called Street Sounds Electro 1 to 14.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and they were the first albums that were sequenced, and I was fascinated why the music didn't stop. And this was at the very beginning of kind of like the first wave of hip hop culture, if you like, and breakdancing and being a b-boy and all those things. Like I was 7 or something, but I was fascinated, and I became like a breaker, and that's what I wanted to do. and that was my first kind of introduction to music, and then like new romantic and all that kind of vibes, but like synthy pop stuff. But I was too young, and I was just interested in anything that wasn't on the radio.
Nice
stuff that wasn't. Yeah. No, it's still to this day. You know, that's not really changed.
So it's always been about the underground for you.
Well, not to kind of like stroke my chin or any of those things. Like, you know, it's on the radio, I don't care. Just curious as to what else is, what else people are doing. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I don't care. I don't measure a record's quality in terms of its commercial success. I measure the record's quality on, does it make me feel good or doesn't it? And that's it. Really simple.
Yeah, that's a good standard of measure. So you were already like thinking about being a DJ when you were in the single digits, which is which is unique. Because a lot of people like in dance music don't discover the art of DJing or don't really get into this until they're much older. How did you like nurture that need to create at that young of an age?
Well, firstly, my mother and father bought me my first boombox, or was it called in England, like a ghetto blaster, or you know, the big stereo. I was too little to carry, but I was fascinated because you could play the two tape cassettes at the same time and kind of get them working in sync. So that was kind of my first thing. But because I was a b-boy and I'd go around having like breakdance contests with like the kids in the neighborhood and stuff, I liked playing the music, and I'd play it too loud, and like you say, and I had the full outfits and everything I was in from a young age. But not long after that, really, acid house culture hit the UK. Yeah, and it started quite, you know, a little bit in London, but mainly in the northwest of England. Right, and that's where I lived. So my older brother, who was maybe 15 at the time, was going to these kind of like illegal raves in these huge warehouses. And I was like, where's he going? And he'd bring in these like mixtapes and stuff. And eventually, over like quite a short period of time, I started kind of stealing his tapes and listening. What's this music? And again, it was counterculture. It wasn't on the radio at first. It was on some sort of pirate stations, and these like mythical 12-inch records would suddenly start appearing. And I was like, okay, I'm interested in that. So I followed it. And then he introduced me to this DJ. And this guy was mixing on 3 decks instead of 2. And I couldn't figure out what he was doing. I couldn't figure out 2 decks. I never touched a set of decks at this point. And it was this guy called Carl Cox. you might have heard of him.
Maybe.
Which is mad. Yeah, which is crazy because he was the first DJ that kind of blew my mind. And eventually he went on to DJ at my wedding, which is just mad.
What a crazy full circle moment.
Yeah, it was. And he also presented me with my best DJ award as well. So it was all these kind of things, which was crazy. But I was fascinated because the reason I like Carl in different to the other mixtapes I was listening to is because I had almost like a hip hop mix attitude, where he was like cutting and chopping and splicing and taking ownership of the music rather than kind of letting the tracks just play in and out and one after the other and all those things. And I love that kind of like control technique, as in like in charge technique. Yeah. And that's what hip hop DJs did. And that's what that's what Carl was doing. And that's was like, okay, that's where I want to follow. So I did. And eventually, I got a set of decks just by chance because I don't know if you can see the scar on my nose just there. Yeah. But I fell over in the neighborhood when I was like 15 or 16, and there was glass everywhere, and I forgot all about it. and then one day, my friend in school was like, "Do you want to buy a set of these Technics 1200 turntables off my father who's selling them?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's go and see them." And we've seen them, and I'll take them. Absolutely 100%. It was perfect. It was like, honestly, it was like saying, like Angel Gabriel or something. It was like, and I've seen them. But at the time, it was £600, I remember. And it may as well have been 6 million because I never even had £6 at the time. I never had anything. We didn't have any money at all.
Right.
So I was like, okay, but I went to sleep thinking, okay, I've got to get them. And I woke up the next morning, and the first letter I ever received in my life was from the local authorities as an apology for the scar on my nose because I tripped over and ripped my face to shreds on the glass.
Yeah.
And it was £650 to buy. And I went off and bought those decks. It was literally the next morning.
That's so cool that it was almost exactly the amount of money that you needed.
Yeah,
it's like there was something out there, some kind of force out there was saying you need to do this.
Well, I think so. I'm not religious, and I don't.
Neither am I.
I don't follow any kind of like spontaneous, like what is like fashionable to be spiritual or all that shit. But I do follow will.
Yeah.
And I do follow will. And if you can think of something that's here, it's happening. If it's here, it's just an idea. But if it's there,
yes,
it's coming.
Yes, absolutely. So. You come from a city that has a really long history of being, just a musical city. How do you feel like that's played a role in how you've developed both creatively and culturally?
Well, of course, you can't say Liverpool and music and not say the Beatles, and I think what they've done for music scene around the world has been phenomenal. But that was obviously way before my time. And you know what? Thinking about it, I never listened to them at all growing up. It's only into my 20s when I started buying their music and listening to it, and from a kind of production standpoint of what George Martin, the kind of fifth Beatle, did in terms of producing music, and I was fascinated and still am. But what was interesting about Liverpool was the night scene in terms of like I say, acid house culture,
right, was
enormous, and then it went on from illegal raves to legal raves with a club called Cream. Right. And that really put what was then like a house and techno onto the almost like mainstream high street map. but these like enormous weekly events in Liverpool for like 3,000 people, which was unheard of at the time in terms of like underground new music. It used to be, you'd go to somewhere that was kind of like shoes and a shirt and nice trousers, and you'd have a few drinks and you'd dance to kind of pop music and all that stuff. Just,
right.
You know, like we call it like a ritzy club. But then it went from that to Cream. And then you come in and you'd wear like a really cool outfit, listen to brand new music from like Tony Humphries or Andrew Weatherall or, you know, people like that. So it was really specialist and it changed everything. And that's obviously where I needed to be. And so I went to Cream every week for 7 years, while practicing my like DJ skills at home and trying to get gigs locally and all those things, and give them mixtape after mixtape after mixtape out to the people in Cream. And then eventually I won a national DJ competition.
Right. And
then things started to happen. And I got residencies at Ministry of Sound and then Renaissance and then a few gigs in Ibiza, Apache, and things started to change. And then eventually I got the call up, you know, and I got to play, I got the offer to be a resident at Cream, which was like a dream come true, really, in a lot of ways.
So how'd that feel to be like finally after going there for so long and being a part of the scene and like kind of grinding away at your own craft, to be asked to be a resident at something that was so foundational in your own development?
Well, it was enormous. It's like someone, say, in New York that's been, hitting a baseball and eventually gets signed for the Yankees.
Yeah.
It's the same principle for me. I was on the, even though I was dancing and getting wasted and having a good time and meeting people and listening to music and absorbing everything, it wasn't just that I was taking in. It was the sound and the lights and the people and how you get in and trying to kind of really take it in. And I mean, again, this might sound a bit weird, but Cream got renovated by Steve Dash, who's like a famous sound engineer from New York. He's the greatest of the greats. He's done Womb in Tokyo, and I think he did Twilo, and he did Cream in Liverpool. And what Steve did, he introduced the concept to the UK of floated turntables, which was like the 1210s on essentially big, thick, elastic bands.
Yes, I remember this.
To help with the sound in the room, to use his sound systems, which he'd crafted personally. Now, when they changed that into Cream, and bear in mind, I was just a raver at this point, and I'd go every week. I used to go home. Some nights I couldn't sleep, worrying about how I'm going to use those decks. This was like a year, maybe 2 years, if not more, before the conversation came of, do you want to be residents? And I just think, oh, fuck, they're going to come and ask me. Sooner or later, they'll come and ask me. It's going to be in this place. And it was. And it was in this place called the Lyceum Bar in Liverpool. I dreamt or willed that they were going to come and ask me. And they did, in the same place. And it happened that way. And then they asked me to be resident. And I was there for 6 years. I went from, I thought it was going to be warm-up sets to playing all night long, 6 hours, 7 hours sometimes. And it was, but what was interesting, even though I thought I was quite an accomplished DJ and do all these tricks and all these things, I listened to Carl Cox and Roger Sanchez and Derek Carter and all these guys that owned the music properly. And technically, what I learned when I started playing 6 hour sets is that's when you become a proper DJ. You have to start again, learn how to kind of embrace the room, warm it up, take it to peak, keep people entertained, and really kind of explore music and do that. Because 6 hours, you get through a lot of music, really. Yeah. So you have to kind of make sure you get new music every week, and then you build up your audience, and then they stay faithful, and all these things that I learned in that room, the annex of Cream, that it's put me on to the rest of my career with confidence.
That's such a beautiful story. Like, it seems like there's been so many of these full circle moments in your life. Like everything that you've kind of willed so many things into existence. What I find interesting is that, you reached this pinnacle in your career where you were working at the club that you had grown up raving at. And then you left Cream to go start your own thing at Circus.
Well,
what led to that decision?
I didn't leave.
Oh, you didn't leave.
Let me explain what happened there, because I was doing 6 hours in the annex, which is the original room of Cream. Yet in the other room, the music that they were playing was getting further and further and further and further away from what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I was okay, they're over there, that side doing that thing, and I'm doing mine. But it was becoming too far. It was almost like candy hard house in, glow sticks and just stuff. And it wasn't, look, whatever people are into, that's their thing. And I get it, but it was starting to reflect negatively on me. And people thought, was that what he does as well? And,
right.
And I'd worked so hard to bring people to the UK for the first time. Like I brought Halo and Hippie and Onions and Joski and, the Wamadoo Project and Peace Division and all these people to the annex for the very first time.
Right.
To the UK for the first time. So I said to Cream, look, guys, got a decision here. Obviously, I don't want to leave. I love you guys, but I can't carry on doing this. So one or two things is going to happen. I either leave or I start my own night. And they're like, okay, well, you start your own night. What do you want to call it? So I went off, and then I was in this crazy after party in a penthouse on Washington Avenue. No, on Collins Avenue in Miami, and it was crazy, and all the UK and Americans are there, and it was going nuts, and it was just like a circus. Everyone was going crazy. So I was like, okay, that's it. So I went to Cream and said, okay, we're going to call it Circus. This is why. I'm going to get my friends in to come and play, and we're going to do this once a month. But then Cream shut out the blue. It shut overnight. And I was on my first holiday in 10 years, and I got a message to say Cream had closed. And I was obviously heartbroken because, I felt like I'd just been dumped on my girlfriend.
Yeah.
That type of feeling, because the place was so personal to me.
Right.
And then I thought, oh shit, my own night's gone as well. But fortunately, my friend who had met at Cream, who was a bit of a promoter in Liverpool at the time, Richard, who now is one of my longest serving friends. He's the owner of Park Life Festival, Warehouse Project. He's a partner in Lovebox. Obviously owns Circus, Shibuku. He is like now a rave scientist. He phoned me up and said, look, would you want to do your party Circus with me? And we'll do it together in this little place, and we can start together. I was like, okay, cool. So we just started, and it was quite funny because we'd already had these posters made with Cream, and it had the big Circus logo on the top, nothing on the bottom, and then a tiny little Cream logo underneath.
Yeah.
And because we were starting ourselves, we never had any money, obviously.
Right.
We didn't really know what we were doing. So we just took the posters to a poster shop and cut the Cream logo off and just went around putting those posters up.
I love that.
And it took what resourceful. But then we started our night. We started our night together, thinking it was going to be like a couple of hundred people, but it was 500 people showed up, and it was beautiful, and everyone had a great time, and it had everything about the annex room and our personalities, which are it's just great music, new house and techno, and an inclusive atmosphere. That's everything that I really insist upon, is people are made to feel welcome. Especially, I want people to come to everything that I do, even by themselves. Even now, even my DJ gigs, no one is excluded ever. It's really important that people feel, like I say, included, especially if they've worked all week and they've got their $25 or whatever it is for the ticket. I've always said it, and it might sound like a bit of a corny cliche, but the people who pay to get in are always the only important people in the club.
Absolutely.
They're the most valuable people. So I've always tried to make sure that people feel included and we have a good time together, and it's a bit fun. Even though the music's kind of serious, the attitude's a bit silly, so that's the way it's worked.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're talking about community there, and like you kind of carried on the work that Cream was doing into Circus, and you brought that community with you to Circus. Which kind of leads me to my next question is, you've kind of been involved in a lot of different community organizing projects, both in music and outside of music. And I'm just kind of wondering, why is it so important that you give back in the way that an activist does?
Well, I just think maybe that's just my default setting,
Yeah.
really. Because it's not kind of like I'm giving back to get something out of it, or
Right.
I'm kind of I'm thinking, if I do this, it's going to take me on to this next place, and then I can take. Because if that's the ultimate goal, I'm not selling anything.
Yeah.
My attitude is it's really important that you contribute to the scene, because if you are concentrating on taking out from the scene, then it's not going to save you.
Yeah.
So if you're helping others, if you're helping with like a record label, that's contributing. If you're doing events, that's contributing. If you're putting music out into the world, if you're sharing your knowledge, or you're kind of inviting new artists onto a label, or people to warm up, or you're giving your advice, then you are supporting your own platform. And
Yeah.
at the very least, it feels great.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It definitely feels you're contributing to the ecosystem, which is, the only way that it can move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which leads me to the first dance, which is, it that's a community organizing project. I mean, you work with the government to bring, and England was just on lockdown prior to this. Like there was like no hope, and you guys brought the first event with no masks. It was like bringing back the rave to the UK, which is a huge effort. Can you talk a little bit about the process of being the first to open up in that way and what it meant for you personally?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a complicated story in a lot of ways. It wasn't just like, by the way, go and get people tested and then sell your tickets and come in. That was the easy part. It was born about 6 months ago, in terms of kind of, I just thought, okay, at some point there's got to be test events in the UK, because it's so strict. There's no events across the UK. And I don't know if you know, but I went on this crusade to kind of go off and help as many people within our industry as I could. I didn't know where I was heading or how I was heading there, but I was on my way. So I was knocking on the door of like my local council, then Liverpool council, then they were speaking to central government and saying, look, we need support for people that haven't had any financial support throughout all this pandemic. So through those conversations I was having with like major MPs, and then even Prince William at one point, and on all these things, where he came to me and we had this like 45-minute conversation. My kind of position in terms of visibility was raising, if you like. So to cut the long story short, when central government in London said to Liverpool, because you've done such an amazing job with mass testing in Liverpool, would you like to do the pilot events? Now, I'd already been in touch. So they came to myself and my business partner, Richard McGuinness, who I mentioned before, and said, guys, would you like to do these events? And we're like, yeah, man, it's cool. Let's put it on. We had 3.5 weeks notice from that conversation to opening the doors. Now, selling the tickets, obviously organising the lineup, selling the tickets, building the event, because it's just an empty warehouse. And we had to build it. There's no water, there's no electric, there's no power of anything. There's obviously no staging, no toilets, nothing. We have to build everything. Right. Then outside in the streets, then deal with the media avalanche, which came to kind of like 7 billion engagements in the end.
Jesus, that's so
7 billion.
It's huge.
It was the biggest news story around the world for nearly for a good few days.
Well, yeah, my mom was talking to me. My mom was talking to me about it, and she's in her 70s.
There you go. That summarizes the reach. But all that stuff I've mentioned was the easy part. The difficult part was on a daily basis. Myself, my business partner, Rich, our production team, Sam, our health and safety guy, Eddie, Liverpool Council, Matt from Liverpool Council, Claire, Robin, all these kind of super professionals, the scientists from the government of London. We had to be on this call every day at 4:30 p.m. to discuss what today's issues are. Now, how can I put it? It was so complex. Every day there was an enormous set of challenges that we had to kind of overcome, agree on, decide how we could deal with the data exchange going from obviously buying the ticket to the data from your health condition when you have your test. So there were so many variables. It was like a moving target on a circular board, trying to grab it in the dark for all of us every day for 3 weeks. It was so complex. But we were dealing with all that stuff in the background, which was nuts. But then obviously the dates were coming thick and fast, and the lineup was building. Then we had to advertise it, then sell the tickets, then deal with, in fairness, a small backlash from people that were against the idea for their personal reasons. But again, as it turns out, even a couple of thousand people saying blah 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 blah, it was a grain of sand on the beach. If it turns out, because once you get such a high positive reaction of like 7 billion people, engagements, then.
Right.
But overall, though, it was absolutely magic. We got there, and when we opened, it was beautiful beyond belief. It really was.
Yeah, it looked like it. I mean, the sense of joy I could just feel from even videos and pictures of it was tremendous. Like, just so tremendous. And it looked like the energy on the dance floor and in the booth was just insane. And how did it feel to be able to step back on stage after so much time?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because when I got to the peak moment and I had to play my set and do that big intro, and everybody was waiting for the moment and what you're going to do, it was almost like a relief. And what I mean by that is a relief that I was able to DJ, a relief that there was people there ready to go. I was excited to DJ for the first time in 14 months. But what you don't know is from 6 a.m. that day until 10 p.m., I was doing interview after interview after interview after interview after interview. And they weren't kind of like just people having a chat. It was like Bloomberg, New Yorker, Washington Post, New York Times podcast, ITV, BBC, did it one after the other all day. So it was like a break, to be honest, getting up there and DJing. Yeah. As soon as I come off the decks, I had to start again and again and again. And it was great because I was cool with doing these interviews because I knew it was going to fall, it was going to kind of fade off, and this was our moment in time. And as it happens, it's probably the most covered the most covered story in electronic music history, probably in terms of numbers.
Yeah.
And another thing I wanted to mention was the responsibility when we were trying to kind of put it all together. We were just saying, okay, we knew we had to kind of make this work. We knew that we were in a spotlight, but we didn't anticipate the amount of spotlight, I have to admit. Yeah. But I think we got through it gracefully, and we came out the other side with a really, positive outlook on the way things went. And also, now that the data is out, it looks like out of 60, 70,000 people that went to these events. Obviously, ours was 6,500, and another one in Liverpool about 5,000 to 6,000. Then there's football matches up and down the country and snooker, and so around 60,000 people in terms of the pilot events. And there was about 10 positive COVID cases, and even they are they're not sure whether they happened in the events or they were after the events, any of those things. So it's proved almost unequivocally that the events were really, really positive and safe, and importantly, enormously enjoyable, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. I mean, just to have the data to support that it's okay to open back up is huge. And also, I mean, you have a lot of perspective. You've been watching or been a part of the dance music culture since its inception in the UK. So how does it feel to look back on that with the perspective that you have and say that, to see where it came from with the legal warehouse raves, and to be here a part of the most covered dance music event in all of history?
I guess, I will take a moment in the future to look back and think, okay, that was pretty cool. It was nice, but in my mind, I'm already looking at what's next.
Right.
And what is next is I'm already in direct contact with the powers that be in the government to make sure that electronic music is now going to be considered as a legitimate art form in the UK, because at the moment it's not. The government, not mentioning any names, I had a direct conversation with them only a few days ago, and they don't understand the 30-year history and the footprint and the cultural and economic exposure of what has happened from the UK around the world for 30 years, and they just don't get it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to kind of give them an understanding in terms of like I say, it's a value in so many ways, why it should be nurtured and cherished and understood, and why kids go to certain universities around the UK, and why the Prodigy went from making music on a crappy little laptop all the way to headlining Fuji Rock in Japan and Glastonbury and all those things, and the lineage. They don't get it. Right. That's my next project. I've already started. I started that 5 months ago, and myself and a few others from like leading figures from dance music, shout to Michael Kill. We're working on it to make sure that within a short period of months, the government will finally have to take on what we do seriously and permanently. So that's the legacy project. And if it wasn't for the first dance, I don't think it would have been as understood in terms of, because they see the numbers, they see the reaction, and they're like, okay, this is real.
Yeah.
So now we've got that kind of ammunition to get, that they are listening up, and they can see that we are clearly professionals.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm using that as a springboard to kind of make sure that we, as a music community in the UK, forever are protected going forward. So if I pull that off, I'll give myself some props.
There you go. And having said that, what excites you about the future of dance music?
Oh, well, these days, what excites me is anything. I'll take anything, because I don't get the future. I'm playing a social distancing gig tomorrow, and it's the only one I'm doing all year. But I'm just dying to play some music. But what excites me more than anything is the idea of no restrictions. Just being able to just go out there and have that reappreciation, is probably a good way to put it. That kind of understanding of, okay, this is actually amazing, because maybe, not maybe, we all took it for granted. Yeah. We all took seeing each other for granted, and dancing for granted, having a few drinks, seeing each other and all those. And our communities, no matter what walk of life you're in, we all, by default, no one's fault, we took it for granted. But now I don't think we will ever again. Certainly not in this generation. So for me, that's the most exciting part, just being able to kind of go out there, play music, and people give a shit.
Yeah.
So, for all sorts of reasons. And hopefully that will be sustained for as long as, well, forever, hopefully. Absolutely.
Well, that's all I have for you. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us today. This was just a really fantastic conversation, and I'm leaving it feeling very invigorated and happy and excited and inspired. And I'd like to thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for taking the time to have a chat, and it's been nice questions. So good luck with everything, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, Alex.
All right, bye.